G'day, my lords and ladies. Today I'm going to talk about the need for speed. So when you are shooting as a war archer, it is important to be able to shoot quickly. And this is your primary offensive passive skill set. And by offensive, that means the better at it you are, the more able you are to kill others. And by passive, I mean that through continuous training, you can get better at it without having to consciously think about it on the field. And anything you don't have to consciously think about in the field frees up your focus to be thinking about other things. So that's always a very good thing indeed. So I'll look at what I'm talking about when I'm talking about shooting quickly, and also how to train it and some of the things that can impact on it. So first of all, what am I talking about? So I'm talking about the cycle time, or the time taken from the point of loosed an arrow to the point where you are able to create a threat with your next arrow. And so that does not necessarily mean loosing the next arrow. That means being in a position where you are able to loose that next arrow. For various reasons, you might not shoot as quickly as you possibly can. Once you can have that arrow on the bow pointing at someone, you might change targets, you might take careful aim, you might take a step before shooting, any other number of things. But as long as that arrow is on your bow and drawn and ready to be shot, you are presenting a threat to your opponent and or opposition. And the faster you can reload the arrows, the better off you're going to be for a number of reasons. There's the very, very obvious reason, and that is that if you can cycle your arrow twice as fast as another archer, then that means you can kill people twice as fast as any other archer. So as a very, very simple mathematical way of thinking about it, faster you can cycle your arrows, the more arrows you can put down range in a certain period of time, the faster you're going to kill people on the other side. But it's not just about massive arrows down range. All things being equal, an archer who can cycle faster than another archer will be in a place where they can provide a threat much sooner than the other archer, or sooner full stop. And that gives the archer who is faster an immediate psychological advantage. So if you have two people who loose in almost exactly the same time and both miss, the person who can reload fastest has the advantage, and they can provide an offensive threat faster than the other person, which means the other person has to either suck it up and hope they don't get hit, or they have to move in some way to avoid being hit. So the archer who can cycle faster has a psychological advantage. There's a number of things that can impact on how quickly you can shoot your arrows. Your kit is really, really important. So what's important about your kit is that it's comfortable, that it's familiar, that it's easy to use, ideally easy to maintain. And when you're practicing for war archery, you should wear your kit, and you should always wear as much kit as you need to wear, that everything you're wearing can impact negatively on your ability to shoot quickly. So sometimes when I'm training, I'll not put on my leg armor. So if I'm focusing on my speed, my legs don't actually impact on that at all. So I don't put my leg armor on. However, I'll put on my helmet, my gorget, my half gauntlets, my kidney belt, my gambeson, my arm harness, all these things which in some small way do impact on how quickly I can shoot, and also where everything sits. Having a suit of armor and kit that enables you to be consistent is really useful. The single most important bit of armor is your helmet, because your helmet has the biggest single impact on how you shoot. So it changes what you can see, how you can see it. Really importantly, it changes your anchor points. So even if you were to not have any other armor at all, just putting a helmet on when you're doing training for archery is a legitimate way of improving your skill as a war archer. And indeed, even if you don't have, you might not have a helmet, but you might have a fencing mask. Even putting a fencing mask on will basically get half the value of having all your armour on, as compared to not having anything at all. So if you're training to be a war archer, particularly when you're starting out, think to yourself, I don't have all this stuff. Just borrow a helmet or borrow a fencing mask and just practice with that. That alone will have a huge amount of value above and beyond that of shooting without the helmet at all. There's a number of things that are really important in that reload cycle. So one is your posture and your movements. So ideally, you don't want to be reaching down to a quiver that's strung low on your leg to reach for an arrow. If you have to bend over to pull an arrow out of your quiver, then someone who's watching you carefully from the other side of the field can see that movement and they know exactly where you are in your cycle. Likewise, a very common tell is that of an archer who visibly moves their head and their helmet looking down. If you are looking down, then that again is a tell for where you are in the shooting cycle. Also, possibly more importantly, anyone who's watching you carefully knows that at that precise moment in time, you are not looking up, and that will be the precise moment when you want to loose an arrow at them, because for that split second, they're not seeing what you're doing. To a certain degree, I will gauge archers on a war field by those head movements. So that particular habit of looking, visibly moving your head to look down is something that can be relatively quickly and easily trained out as a habit. So if I see an archer out in the field doing that, then I know that they probably haven't done a massive amount of training, which tells me a bit about their experience levels and what I might be able to expect from them. They might have a reputation as being a really good archer. And the second they get to the point where they're actually pointing that arrow at someone, that's when I'll start to think to myself, okay, now they're a threat. But if they're looking down to knock the arrow, I'll be thinking to myself, well, their passive movement is probably not all that strong. They need to focus on their arrow when they're knocking it. I can pick a point when they're not moving and they are looking down, and that's when I'm going to kill them. So that's one of the things I'll be looking at. Another thing that's important is to work out what works for you in terms of your draw. And there's lots of different ways of drawing a bow. The three most common that I'll discuss right now is your standard three-fingered draw, which anyone who has done any sort of traditional target archery will be quite familiar with. There is the thumb draw, which anyone who's familiar with Eastern archery will be familiar with. And then there's the inverted hand or dagger draw, which is the same as your three-finger draw, except your hand's upside down. Now, of these three ways of shooting, from what I can see, the thumb draw is probably, all things being equal, the fastest. Having said that, what works for you is what works for you. So that's what you should train with. I have done a little bit of thumb draw archery. I'm not particularly good at it. If I were to put years of practice into it, then I would probably be able to get to a point where I'm faster than I am today. And maybe I should. But I haven't. Likewise, the dagger draw, theoretically, it's a little bit faster because there's a couple less movements, and there are times when I have used that, but there is a little bit of a trade-off there with your accuracy and anchor points. So those are things that you have to consider as well. Ultimately, finding what works for you and then training with that is what you should do. In terms of upping your tempo, getting to shoot faster, I think of the reload cycle as being 4 beats. pull, knock, draw, loose. So you pull the arrow from your quiver, you knock the arrow, you draw the arrow, and you loose the arrow. And so when I'm shooting and trying to improve my speed, I've got these 4 beats going through my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if, for example, you're shooting as a group and you want to improve your speed as a group, then you might have one person counting the beats and everybody else trying to keep up that speed, and then you just increase the tempo until you get to the point where you're fumbling arrows. And over time, doing that enough, you will get faster and faster and more confident at shooting quickly. I'll show you a little bit of video here of myself in the field, just going over those 4 beats and also a little bit about quivers and how they work for me.
So with increasing the speed, I operate on a system of 4 beats. So the first beat is pull the arrow from the quiver, the second beat is to knock the arrow, the third beat is to draw the arrow, and the fourth beat is to loose the arrow. So you pull the arrow from the quiver, knock the arrow onto the bow, draw the arrow and loose. Pull, knock, draw, loose. Pull, knock, draw, loose. Pull, knock, draw, loose. With my quiver, it sits on my kidney belt, it sits quite high. Now, the best place for a quiver and the best kind of quiver is the one that works for you. So whatever works for you is what you should use. There's a number of reasons why I have the quiver sitting quite high. One is that the hand motion to draw an arrow is floating around the chest level. So when I'm pulling that arrow from the quiver, like so, and drawing the bow, the hand is hovering around about that same area. I don't have to reach down and change my posture, which is a tell for someone else to see that I'm knocking my arrow. Another advantage of having this quiver quite high is that I can ascertain how many arrows I've got left by rolling the hand around the arrow. So when I'm drawing an arrow, it's a rolling hand motion, and then I pull the arrow out. So this won't give me a precise number of arrows, but I can definitely feel tactily the difference between having 2 arrows and having 2 dozen arrows. So that helps me out with how many arrows I've got left.
And we're back to me again. One last thing I'd like to discuss is that there are a lot of videos out there on YouTube and similar about speed shooting. And there's a lot of people who have spent a lot of time, a lot more time than I have in many cases, focusing on trying to shoot really, really fast. And I would suggest that you have a bit of a look and see what some other people have done. Some people explain how they shoot, other people don't. I'm going to post a couple of links below for a couple of channels and a particular video. One of the things I'll observe on a personal note is that quite often, coupled with these videos that people have posted of this is what I do and I'm shooting quickly, is quite vinegary comments about the people in the videos. And I find it, almost amusing, but in a rather sad way that people do that. So, someone's going into the effort of doing something and sharing it with the world, often sharing exactly how they're doing it, their ideas and so on and so forth. Sometimes those comments can be quite vitriolic, and sometimes they're just downright stupid and wrong as well. So I say, have a look at those 3 links that I've sent below, but have a look at other stuff as well. And if you can learn something from what someone has done, then that's fantastic. If you look at it and you sort of think, well, this is not really all that useful or good or right or whatever, then just tell other people, don't go there and have a look at it. You don't have to be unpleasant about it in the comment section. And you certainly don't have to subscribe to it either. Speaking of subscribing, I'll be doing more videos. If you want to subscribe, please do so. And I will be back again at some point in time in the not so distant future to discuss yet another aspect of war archery. Thank you.